Welcome to the Making Kids Count podcast, brought to you by Kentucky Youth Advocates, where we sit down with policymakers, community leaders, and youth to discuss ideas to make Kentucky the best place to be young. Now here's your host, Terry Brooks.
Welcome and thanks for joining us today. I'm Terry Brooks, and welcome to another Making Kids Count podcast. I am so honored and almost excited to have as our guest today Kentucky's 48th Auditor of Public Accounts, Allison Ball. Before she was elected to the auditor position, Allison served 2 terms as state treasurer. And prior to that, I think I've got this right, she spent some 4 years as the Floyd County assistant attorney. And we are just so appreciative, Auditor Ball, that you joined us today. I always try to be really upfront with y'all when we have guests on and acknowledge any issues or biases. So I'm going to acknowledge one. I'm an Allison Ball fan, so I just need to frame that. Allison, you've heard me say before that in many ways you have reinvented the auditor's office to make it a voice for kids. To our viewers, what I would say is when I think about Allison Ball, the adjective relentless pops into my mind. And if you look at that definition, unrelenting means not yielding in determination, not weakening in vigor or pace. Allison Ball, you are relentless, and I appreciate it. Welcome.
Thank you, Terry. What a very kind thing to say. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, you have been on our podcast more than once. And as we talked off camera, while I know every person has watched every one of those episodes, I'm just going to assume somebody didn't. And I think one of the most interesting stories you describe is how your families came to Kentucky in like the 1790s and how it went from there to you deciding to run for public office, because very much that's a personal faith journey, what I remember.
Oh, yeah.
So can you talk just a little bit about how in the world did you get into this?
Sure. So I am deeply rooted in Kentucky. My family came from Virginia at that point in time, way back in the 1790s, to Eastern Kentucky. So I am 9th generation from Floyd County, from Prestonsburg. And that means I'm related to about half the county as that works.
That helps on election day.
It does. So proud of my region, so proud of that area. And when I graduated from law school, you're trying to figure out what do you want to do and where do you feel like God's leading you. And at that point in time, I really wanted to come home, be a part of my community where I grew up and make a difference. And I felt like God opened up some doors for me to get back home. So I worked in a law firm for a little while, and then the doors opened for me to be an assistant county attorney, which was a fantastic experience. I got to deal with dependency, neglect, and abuse cases primarily. I did juvenile cases. And I think that was really important for me starting off to get to deal with kids who are in vulnerable positions, who need help. And I really developed a heart through that experience. I stayed there for 4 years, and then I went and practiced bankruptcy law, which was actually another piece that I felt like was important in my understanding of what the issues are in Kentucky. So we dealt with, my buddy of mine and I from law school, we opened up a small practice in Pikeville, and we helped people who had medical bills that were out of control. They maybe worked in the coal mines and had lost their jobs, a variety of instances. And then we helped some coal companies that were wrapping up their business. So those experiences were meaningful, and I knew I was helping people, and that was great. But I also had interest in economics and policy at the statewide level. And I remember having a conversation with somebody, and they were like, you know what, you could do a statewide run. And I had never thought of that as an actual possibility. I thought, okay, you run for school board first and see how that goes. And then
kind of move up the ladder.
Yeah. The ladder. By the time you're 60, then maybe you run for a statewide office. And that is a track for a lot of people. But as I was praying about it and trying to figure out what the direction was for that point in my life, I wasn't married yet. I didn't have kids. And I just felt like, okay, I've got nothing to lose. And I kept kind of asking God, close this door if this isn't the right thing for me to do. And I can remember being in the mailbox because I mailed my letter of intent. I remember my hand being on the letter as I was about to drop it. And I was like, okay, God, like here I am about to do this. And I feel like you've been opening doors. So I'm going to let this letter go and we see what happens. And so that's how I filed my letter of intent to run for state treasurer. It was an open seat at that point in time. And it fit so nicely with a lot of things I really cared about. By that point in time, I was really interested in financial literacy because I wanted to help people make good decisions. And of course, I've always cared about children and their experiences and what they're going through in Kentucky. And it took me a little while to be able to tap into that more. But financial literacy was a key part of that. I wanted to help people throughout Kentucky. So ran for that primary. It was a three-way primary. I won that first primary by about 13 points, and then I won the general by 22. Interestingly enough, I've won about 22 points every time I've run in a general. So I've had three races now, two as treasurer and then one as auditor. So that seems to be my number. I'm not sure why, but
Yeah, and I think you're doing you're putting on a cloak of humility because I think every time you run, you get more votes than any other statewide candidate too, don't you?
just about. The first two times I did, Mike Adams actually got a little bit more than I did in that last race.
Well,
But as
dang him.
he was nice enough to point out that he had more no votes against him than I did. So I feel
Oh,
like that
okay,
counts for
okay,
something.
okay, okay. Well,
um,
so let me open with two different questions. One is there may be folks who do not know exactly what in the heck the auditor of public accounts is about. And there is a traditional answer to that. So I want you to share kind of in general what it is,
sure.
but you clearly have redefined what that office can do. So talk a little bit from a meta narrative view of generally speaking, what's that auditor position about? And then how do you see it? Because you see it differently than it's been seen in the past.
Well, great question, Terry. So when I talk to people, they usually think of me as the IRS. And I tell people, no, that I'm not the IRS. I'm not coming for you as a taxpayer. That's not my job. My job is making sure the government is in line. I'm making sure that I'm protecting taxpayer dollars. We do deal with the finances a lot, but my authority is broad. And it is about ensuring that we are complying with the law on all levels. We're getting our money's worth. So I see it as not just the finances. A lot of other auditors have really zeroed in the finances, and we do that. We focus on the finances, protect those taxpayer dollars. But the authority is broader than that. I can make sure that you are complying with the law if you are a government actor, and that we're getting our money back for what we've invested, what we've paid into it. So it has always been this broad. It is nothing new to me, but every auditor sort of takes their own approach and how they want to deal with it. One thing that was added to my office that really I think has been an enhancement on what we're able to do is the ombudsman was added to my office. And I know that's a funny word. A lot of people aren't familiar with it. Um, it was at one point in time a part of the cabinet for health and family services. And your listeners are usually going to know that cabinet. That's the cabinet that deals with foster kids, that deals with Medicaid, a variety of vulnerable populations in Kentucky. So the ombudsman was like an auditor for CHFS. The public would contact the ombudsman would investigate, make recommendations, work to resolve issues. And once that was moved from CHFS over to my office, that actually fit very nicely into the work that we do traditionally as an auditor. It's just zeroed in and focused on CHFS. It's just dedicated to that particular cabinet, which is great because while we do audit CHFS and the auditor side all the time, it's high level. It doesn't get to go into the details. Ombud gets to just go into the details, dig in there, fix problems. And as somebody who worked with dependency, neglect, and abuse cases when I was a prosecutor, I really could see the value of having that part of this office connected together, auditor and ombud, working together to find problems, resolve problems, make recommendations, fix things. And so that's led us to do a lot of work that deals with foster kids. The big report that we just released last week came out of that part of the office. So you're right. I have focused a lot on kids, things that impact kids. Some of that is because of the ombudsman's office coming over. Some of it is just the timing. There's some really important issues that involve children throughout Kentucky right now. We're doing a big audit on the Jefferson County public school system, the Fayette County public school system. We just released one a few months ago about the Kentucky Department of Education. So part of it is a timing issue. There are things that need to get resolved. And I think some of it truly is too that it's something that I have a real interest in, and I've known that those tools are there, and it's time to really work on some issues that affect kids.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And to our viewers and listeners, I just want to remind you, because so many of y'all were involved in this, the whole idea of what the auditor talked about, which is an independent ombudsman, came from y'all. It was on the blueprint for Kentucky's kids. It was part of the Face It campaign. And as the auditor said, our perspective on that was not about any particular secretary, was not about any particular ombudsman, but conceptually, you can't take food from the dog you're watching if you're the watchdog. And so the whole premise of that effort, which took more than one session to get done, was the idea that we needed truly an autonomous, independent watchdog. So, Auditor, it's more affirming than you may think to hear you talk about it, because that was our whole vision when we started advancing that. So that's just a nice amen to that blueprint effort from a few years ago. So the obviously the focus, and again, as you noted, whether it's K-12 or juvenile justice, some other things you've been poking around on. But wow, last week your work exploded with the release of a report around temporary placement for kids in state care. So you already kind of alluded to the fact that part of the genesis of this was your interest in kids. I assume another reason was lots of publicity and news headlines about kids in state parks and offices, etc. Uh, I'm curious, and I'm going to assume our listeners are aware of the big picture story, or they wouldn't be watching this. So, as you think about what you did, I'm really curious as to key takeaways. Now, I know the report's almost 200 pages, so I'm not asking you to read it, but when you're driving home and you're thinking about, wow, that really hit me, what are the three or four things that just leap to your head?
Sure. So big picture is there are foster kids that are sleeping in office buildings, that are sleeping in hotels, state parks, community centers. They're all referred to as non-traditional placements. And I think that is first and foremost the first thing anyone should think about, because for a while it was questioned whether or not that was still ongoing, that it had been resolved. And the reality is it is still ongoing. And we did a 22-month review. We found over 300 kids that had had this experience. And one kid is too many. 304 kids is absolutely too many. So, first and foremost, remember that's what's at issue here. Kids sleeping in these conditions, they're not appropriate for kids. And then we also found out it really involves two populations of kids, because there was some discussion for a while. It's just high acuity kids. It's kids that are out of control. We can't find a placement for them. They're usually older kids. And that is one of the populations. We did find children that have real serious needs and they need real serious treatment. And so that population has been staying in office buildings, has been staying in hotels. And there's the other population, which is kids that have been removed maybe from home for the first time. They don't have a lot of diagnoses. In fact, about 130 of the 304 kids fit that category. And some of those were really young. We found of all the kids, about 17 of them were 6 years and younger. And
Wow.
of that number, four of them were under the age of one. So you're talking about infants, small, young kids who really need lots of care, lots of love and attention, lots of security and stability. So this system, I have been concerned that we're now 4 years in that we've been hearing stories about this happening. And I'm concerned that this is becoming baked in. This is part of our system. This is part of what we do. And it doesn't work for either population. It doesn't work for these kids that are young, that have never been removed before. It especially doesn't work for the kids that have violent tendencies, have suicidal tendencies, have risk of runaway, because some really serious things happen when that happens. So it doesn't work for either population. If you look at the conditions themselves, we did site visits at a bunch of the office buildings. Many of them are in high rises or in strip malls. None of them had showers. Kids were having to be driven over to the fire department, to the YMCA, and they're not getting the needs that they particularly need met. So we found very spotty documentation about medical care, about their therapy, about their prescriptions, about their school attendance. So it's a breakdown on every level. Some of it is documentation, and some of it is very serious actual breakdowns of things not happening. And I think it's really valuable. One of the things we did, and this isn't something that we always do, but this was important to get the human impact of this. We did some profiles and we were really careful, nothing identifying. So these kids, if they ever read it someday, we want to protect their dignity. Really careful not to have identifying information. But we found out that there were stories that were worth hearing carefully, without identifying them. And for example, there's one girl, a lot of these teenage kids are at risk, about 40% of them are at risk for being a runaway. And the buildings themselves are not very secure. So it's very common to see these kids run away. One girl, it took 51 months when she ran away from the office building she was staying in, 51 days to be found, so almost 2 months to be found. When she was found in a tent with a middle-aged man who was wanted for murder. So incredibly dangerous situation for that young girl. Another girl, when she was found, she admitted that she was sex trafficked while she was out. And that's common. I think there's a stat that shows 7 in 10 runaways, teenage runaways, end up being sex trafficked because they're very vulnerable and people are looking for kids that fit this kind of profile. So really dangerous risk for what happens to them because of the environment that they're in. There was a boy, this is a good example of why this doesn't work, a boy who was put into a state park. He was a particularly difficult kid to conduct oversight for. Like they really need to have very careful oversight because he had a propensity to burn things, catch things on fire, and sexually aggressive. So a lot of unique oversight responsibilities for this particular kid. He was put in a state park in a cabin and he caught the cabin on fire. So that's a risk to him. Obviously, it's also a risk to the family that's staying in the cabin close by who's on vacation. So it's a system that just does not work. It does not work, and we absolutely can do better. So you asked me, what are the big takeaways? Those are really big takeaways.
Yeah, no, that well, and you know what I think is so powerful, and I would invite our listeners and viewers to think about this. Those profiles are just like heart-wrenching. But beyond that, you know, when you talked about the age issues, because I'll tell you, going in, my opening a hypothesis was exactly what you said, which was high acuity kids in probably Fayette and Jefferson County. And what you learned, as you said, was all ages, all geographies. It's not linked to age or zip code. I've got 9 grandkids. And as you were talking about that, I'm thinking about Callie, who's 4 years old and is probably the cutest 4 year old in the Commonwealth. But I'm thinking like, what would that mean for her as a 4 year old to suddenly not be in a home setting? And then beyond that, because there are terrific residential facilities, not ideal for any kid, you know, not to be at home, but they know how to do this. But again, I'm thinking of Callie Brooks, what it means that suddenly she finds herself in an office chair. So I just want to make sure that our viewers, as much as they hear you talk, want to challenge y'all to personalize what the auditor is talking about, what that would mean to little boys and little girls that you know and the impact on them. So I appreciate you lifting that up. One of the things that I've noticed about your reports that I especially appreciate is when you lay out a problem, you also lay out solutions. And that's kind of where we want to go on this as an organization and what I hope our partners do, which is, you know, we can sit and lament and wring our hands about this situation. I thought actually, as dramatic as some of those profiles and numbers were, the part of the report that gave me hope, that lifted me, was you've got some tangible move ahead ideas. So I'd like you to kind of lift those up. I know you've talked about the power of kinship families, the potential of faith communities, doing a better job in administration. And you and I've talked again off camera that there are other states that have tackled this. Ohio, Tennessee. I mean, we're not talking Oregon and Wisconsin. We're talking neighboring states. So if Allison Ball were doing an agenda for action to address this, what's the Allison plan?
Well, great question. And you're right. One of the things that was really important to me is that we had a path forward. We've got solutions. So we looked at other states and we learned a lot from what they have done to resolve it because there are other states that have had this same issue. So other states have taken steps. A big part of it, I believe, for Kentucky is engaging the faith-based community. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And we've seen some of that already in Kentucky. We saw in Bowling Green, there's a church that's donated a house and it has a kitchen, it has a bathroom, it has 3 bedrooms. They fix it up, make sure it's in great shape, and then they turn it over to CHFS. So the church
Wow.
doesn't then go in it again. Like it's over and it's turned over to them. Anytime something needs to be repaired, to be fixed, HVAC, they said they had an HVAC guy who had to come in and fix it. And they have people who are volunteer to do whatever needs to be done to make sure it's in great shape for these kids. There's another house out in Western Kentucky that is also similar, where a nonprofit, Christian nonprofit, has made it available. So we're already seeing, even in those instances, when you engage the faith-based community, there are people who want to help. They deeply care about making a difference. And I think we can do a whole lot more. Tennessee did that. That was a big part of answering the problem for them. That little house in Bowling Green, we heard a story that there was a foster kid who had to stay the night over there. And he was like, this is the nicest place I've ever stayed in my life. So you don't want kids to have to be removed from home. Like, you would try to figure out what's the best way to handle each particular situation. But if they're going to be removed, you want it to be a place that the kid's like, that's the nicest place I've ever stayed in my life.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and so like, we can do that. We can do that. Obviously, we need to do more in recruitment. There has been a decrease in foster parents who are available. Faith-based community is right to assist with that. There are people who want to jump in, and there are people who want to jump in for both populations I talked about, not just the easy kids, but there
Mhm.
are people who are like, I have hope for the kids that are a little more difficult.
Yeah.
And that's a very Christian response for people to say, like, I know that there's hope there, and I'm not giving up on anybody. And you have that. So faith-based community engagement, I believe, is a real key to resolving this. There probably does need to be some more financial investment into the problem. I do think that's part of it too. We do need to have some facilities that are ready for when you have kids that do need extra. And so I think we can do more intentionally on that. Washington State has done an interesting thing. They have developed a community approach so that way foster parents aren't burnt out, that they have help to be able to keep going. And I think that would be a good thing for us to look at implementing within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. They also require their version of CHFS to check in with the legislature and say, okay, these are how many kids last year that had to sleep in a non-traditional placement. And
Sort of
this is
that
our path to
status
resolve it.
report, sort of the dashboard for these kids. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important too because we've had 40 years of this ongoing. And I really believe, but for the media checking in and doing investigative reporting, and for my office coming in, we would not know that this is ongoing, this is continuing, and the work that you all do because you keep tabs of things too, to the extent that we all can. So, but for us all taking proactive investigative approaches, we wouldn't know this was happening. So I think that would be a good key to resolving this as well.
That's
I
right.
totally
Right.
believe this is fixable. We just need to be committed to fixing it.
So I always want to end by a profound but simple question. I'm a viewer, I'm a listener, I'm hearing this, and it's fired up my brain and it's touched my heart. What do I do? Because I don't want to just listen passively and then worry about it. So if you were talking to that Kentuckian out there that's like, Auditor, you know, you fired me up. Send me in, coach. What can and should your neighbor or that grandma down the street, what should they be doing right now?
So this is one of those rare instances where actual Kentuckians can make a dramatic difference. It isn't something that you just vote on and you talk about and you care about. We actually do need more foster parents. So if you are somebody who's listening and you feel like, you know what, I want to jump in and help with that. I want to do respite care. Maybe I want to do it just temporarily. We absolutely need more recruitment. And maybe you don't have the position in your life where you can take a kid home, but you can fix an HVAC. You can
Mm.
make sure that there's deodorant available for these kids. They've got a backpack with a stuffy in it. There are ways for people to be engaged very clearly. I know you all provide information so that there's resources that they can get tapped into and involved. This is something if you are, and I would encourage, if you feel like you've got a tug on your heartstring, there is a need. We need your help. Jump in and make a difference for these kids. We don't need any more kids sleeping in office buildings. We don't need any more kids having to stay in a hotel room. We need to have them to feel loved, protected, cared for, and we can all make sure that that happens.
Great. Some of our viewers know that I love a certain quote, Auditor, and it comes from the social observer, Ted Sizer. And he writes, when it comes to children, we face a blizzard of opportunities and obligations. And what I take away from your comments when it comes to this issue, every Kentuckian has to look at themselves in the mirror and realize they've got opportunities and they've got obligations to make a difference. Allison Ball, you make a difference every day for Kentucky's kids, and that's why I admire, appreciate, and respect you so very much. Thanks for joining us today. Again, this is Terry Brooks on another Making Kids Count podcast. Thanks to you for joining, and Auditor, thanks especially to you for joining.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you for listening to the Making Kids Count podcast. For more information and to listen to more episodes, visit kyyouth.org/podcast. To support this podcast and our mission as the independent voice for Kentucky kids, please consider making a gift at kyyouth.org/donate.